Tired of business buzzword? We are too. That's why we created Insert Buzzword, a podcast dedicated to uncovering the real stories behind entrepreneurs and business leaders. I'm Jeremy, along with JJ and Tristan. Join us as we explore the triumphs, challenges, and the untold stories of our guests. Let's get this conversation started.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Insert Buzzword. We are down a co-host this week as Jeremy enjoys a holiday in France, but I'm delighted to be joined by Matthew Todd. Matthew, why don't you give us a brief introduction into what you do and who you are?
Well, hello, it's an honor to be here. Very excited. I love listening to podcasts, so it's even more exciting to be on one. Briefly as a challenge, because it's complicated, as they say. Short answer is I'm a musician, but nowadays you need to get to be a jack of all trades and hopefully a master of some. So I have lots of different things that I do, ranging from filmmaking to obviously writing songs, performing as a classical tenor, and lots of other things, working in schools. I work in prisons. We can get into all that. I'll go anywhere.
Perfect. Well, thank you for giving you a taster of your life, I guess. So how did that come about? Did you always have a passion for music? Did you always want to get involved in filmmaking? What were some of your early influences or interests as a child?
I think definitely a big thing was that I'm from a family of 7. So I'm one of 7 siblings, and we did lots of creative things all the time. We lived in some quite difficult areas, it would be fair to say, social deprivation. So we always very, very aware that we kind of felt very different being a family of 7, and but just as well culturally, we're just, a bit different from those around us, and took refuge, I think, in a lot of creative things, playing music together, singing together, making films together. Trying to remake Lord of the Rings, as you do, these sorts of things. And that was when we were very young. And really it just, in some ways just continued. So I think my siblings have always been people that I've worked closely with, and I do actually work with them officially in some capacities now. And two of my brothers are in business together, and I'm part of a film company that involves 2 of my brothers and 2 of my cousins. And so, yeah, it's been very much a family affair, I think.
Okay. And where did you grow up in Scotland?
Initially, until I was about 11, we lived in Ballingry. Well, that's the nearest place. It was Loch Craig, it was called, but nobody's going to know where that is. Between Ballingry and Loch Gelly. So Loch Gelly is famous for the Loch Gelly strap. Ballingry is famous for being Ballingry, really. So it gives you kind of an idea. It was an ex-mining community. There were some amazing folk there, though, really wonderful older people that were a big part of our lives growing up, and a huge support to my family. Very working class, though. And then later we moved up to Caithness. So I was in the very north tip of Scotland. Wow. And that was certainly interesting education.
What took you to Caithness?
Sorry?
What took you to Caithness?
So my dad was a Church of Scotland minister. Okay. So we basically had to go wherever he went. But that he moved, when we moved initially from Fife, that was because the church had actually closed down. So we were doing a joint charge. So it wasn't really anybody's choice in one sense, which I think probably added to the difficulties. The move up north was quite difficult in many ways. You're very isolated. There's some great things about Caithness, but it is just very far away from, if you have friends and family, wherever, further south in Central Belt, wherever it's about 7 hours drive really to get to Caithness from Glasgow or Edinburgh. So it's very isolated.
What was it like living in such a large household?
To be honest, it was great. I don't know if it was great for my parents. I think it probably was later. I think initially when you had like 5 children under 10, that was probably, I don't know how they survived that.
Yeah.
But they did, and then as you get older, you kind of take on more responsibility and sort of help out, and you have a place, and you've got people that you can do creative things with, and it was before phones, and we didn't watch a lot of TV or anything, but we loved films, and so like watching a film together was like a great big treat, and it was great. It was like having your own pre-formed community. We're all very different, and we all went into different things, and we're not carbon copies of each other by any means, but we certainly had that commonality, which meant that there was lots of common interest.
What was the first film that you remember watching?
First film I remember watching?
Yeah.
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, but we had all the kind of classic Disney movies, and which looking back, are really works of art. A lot of them, just the classic ones, Sleeping Beauties, all the kind of the fairy tale ones, and Aladdin, The Lion King, the ones. And the music in them is amazing. They often they'll adopt kind of the musical style of wherever the film is set, and so yeah, I just remember watching them on video, and that just being probably terrible resolution, terrible sound, but it's an amazing experience.
Yeah, was there a particular film that ignited your passion for? Was it one you watched and you're like, oh, I want to make these, or was it something that developed over time? Yeah.
Later in life, the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I mean, we literally tried to, make our own version of Lord of the Rings. It was called Elderall and included dwarves and elves and all sorts of things. And but that was, that was so influential. That's really actually become part of our working life as well. Our film company is called Fellowship Film, after the Fellowship of the Ring, obviously, and we've made a fantasy feature film. Well, fantasy has remained part of that. There's always a fascination with fantasy. 2 fantasy feature films and a third one, hopefully shooting in September, actually. So yeah, 100% watching the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Wow. So the two feature films you've made, what are they? What's the background to those? Where can you watch them? How did you end up developing them?
Yeah. So, well, The Gallic King, I think that's available still on Amazon Prime and that sort of thing. It's probably free by now. I'm not entirely sure. But you could get that in supermarkets at one point. Great excitement when we saw our film pop up on the Asda shelf. I wouldn't necessarily recommend you watch it unless you really enjoy a bit of low budget fantasy feature film. We didn't really expect it to be commercially viable at all. We were making a passion project at the time, and it was a case of we were going to crowdfund it and gather a community of people, because we just knew there were so many people that, like us, just get really excited by making a film with swords and horses and medieval villages and tree demons and all this kind of stuff. So we thought, we could just gather, we could channel all that energy and make something really good. And I don't think we were quite prepared for actually just how much enthusiasm there was for that. We ended up getting loads of people who are into reenactment and so on involved. We built our own village with our own hands from scratch. We're given some land to do that on. We were allowed to borrow to build the village on. Had to all be dismantled afterwards. So it was an absolute blast. It was a ride. But as I say, we hadn't expected it to be commercially viable. So it comes across. It's a fun film, but it's very low budget. Then it got picked up by a sales agent, which we hadn't expected at all. And they're like, "Yeah, we could sell this." We're like, "Really?" And they're like, "Yeah, we could sell this." And so it ended up in the supermarkets on Amazon Prime and stuff.
Well, and how you mentioned it was a passion project, but how do you start, even as a passion project, to start that kind of thing, building a village for a set, and were these friends of yours? Was there a kind of community that you already knew because of your shared interests, or did you have to kind of gather interest from scratch?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, the first film obviously is family. That we had my brother Phil is a professional filmmaker, unlike me, where I I'm a filmmaker, but I wouldn't call myself a professional. But that was a start. We had our, immediate family, brothers and some cousins that were involved in all that. But the crowdfunding was a big part of it, actually. That was an interesting journey. And this was quite, it was a fairly new thing at this point. So being able to shoot some of the film, basically just beg, stealing and borrowing in order to shoot some of the film, and then use the footage from that for our crowdfunder in order to kind of gather as many like-minded people as possible. So actually often ended up people finding out about it through the crowdfunder, because that gathered quite a lot of momentum. And then you had, as I say, like reenactment people and so on who are like used to being Vikings or Romans, whatever. They're saying, "Oh, I'd like to be involved in that. I can swing a sword or whatever." And we did, we cast the kind of main roles and stuff as well, so that you've got people who are super keen really to be involved in a fantasy feature film, even if it is really low budget. So we got really good actors. We got, way better actors than we were expecting to get in order to kind of pull off the film.
Was this all voluntary? Were people paid to do this? What was the setup?
Well, at this point, yes, it was one. It was deferred fees. Yes, those fees are still deferred. I think we were able to pay back a little bit in the end. But the whole thing was on the understanding, like, this is the money we have, the money from the crowdfunder. We have to make it go as far as possible. Yeah, I mean, if we paid everybody, it would have been, I don't know, I'm guessing maybe like 50 times as expensive as it actually was in order to make it, it's, but yeah, it was a once in like, we're not going to do that again, to be clear. Now we pay people properly, and we don't expect anyone to work for free or anything, but it started off just everybody was just pitching in enthusiastically of their own volition.
Okay. And how did that differ from the second film you made? Was the second one before this or after?
So then The Gallic King is what launched it all, really. And then Jessie and the Elf Boy was shot during COVID, actually. So it was very difficult to do that in terms of, we had all these extra regulations and stuff to follow, on top of it being low budget, on top of us trying to do it, and on top of us trying to do it properly in terms of paying people and budgeting for that. I mean, so that was quite a challenge. We did get, I would say, a really nice film out of it in the end. I don't think it has a massive market appeal. It's done well in festivals and things. It's struggling a bit in terms of sales, but it's done well on airlines, interestingly. It works well as a sort of family film that can be sold in airlines and like Emirates and so on, because the content is all fairly safe. So then the airlines are quite attracted to that sort of thing. I wish more people could see that one, really. So that, I don't know if that's available free yet, but that's certainly, you can, get that on iTunes or something like that. Jessie and the Elf Boy. It's actually a really great wee film, I would say. One that we're really proud of, but it hasn't translated into a lot of sales yet.
Okay. And how does that world work in terms of the commercial side of things? How did it end up on airlines and things like that?
So usually you want to try and get yourself a sales agent, and then the sales agent will have all the contacts and they will try and make the sales for you. We've tried a few different things. Like for Jessie and the Elf Boy, we were initially going for more of a hybrid model where we tried to sort of sell it ourselves. Because in theory, you can go to all these people directly. And then there was a guy in America called Shackhead who has a sort of online platform where he uses to kind of sell films and out to all the kind of streamers and stuff like that. But we ended up actually getting a sales agent anyway. And actually, once we got the sales agent Phil Gorn, Wonderful Productions, got us the deals for the airlines and things. And yeah, he's put in a good shift, to be honest. Managed to get us some deals that we didn't think we'd be able to get. So that's good.
What are the different levels of success, so to speak, or commercialization for these kind of films? What would you, if you were to make another one, what what is the threshold financially of sales that is successful for you?
Well, you want to break even. That's the start, so we have broken even for Jesse the Elf Boy. So that for us was a win.
Big win.
It's a very slow burn. Like you make the film and you don't expect to start seeing profit from it when at this level, at this kind of low budget level, for maybe like 3 to 5 years, really.
Wow.
Because it's just little bit by little bit, and then there's all the different levels. So at first, you want to go for as big as you can, and then when you realize that that's not going to work, then you start going for the smaller things like airlines and things, and then hopefully you can get a bit out of that. And then when that's all been dried up, and you think, oh, we're not getting any more from that, then you can go for something like VOD, video on demand, and people can just stream it. And then sometimes I think the Gala King is actually you can watch it for free on YouTube. And somebody somewhere, not us, somebody somewhere is getting a few pennies out of that when people just watch on YouTube.
Okay.
So there's different kind of levels. It's one of these things, the Pareto distribution principle. I like everything. A very small amount of the films make all of the money, and then there's a huge amount of films out there that are made that never break even, and that's actually true for big films as well as tiny micro-budget feature films like us. But what we were very lucky, I think, in was that we sort of stumbled on a model that was actually becoming quite high demand, which is to try to make a film as efficiently as possible with as low budget as possible so that your overheads are as low as possible, and it's much more likely that in this market you're going to be able to make a profit. Because everybody wants to watch films now. People are watching more films than ever before, but they want to be able to watch them for free. They don't want to pay for them because you expect to be able to just go on Netflix or go on YouTube or wherever and just watch a film. And you feel a little bit annoyed if you're being expected to pay £7.99 for something that somebody poured their heart and soul into for 2 years.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting market at the moment.
Okay. And for any listeners that might have an interest in making a film of their own, what advice would you have to anyone starting out on that journey?
Oh, well, I would say enjoy the bit before it starts getting into business for as long as you can. You got to know why you're doing it. And if you just enjoy making films and you enjoy telling stories, as I do, and being creative, then actually as soon as you start having the necessity to make that profitable, it can be quite soul destroying, actually. And so there's that big bit in the middle where you feel like you can't tell the story that you want to tell, and you can't make it profitable, and you're just struggling. And then there's the bit right at the end where maybe you have got success, and you're able to tell the stories you want to tell, and they're successful. And then there's the bit at the beginning where it's just like, well, just tell the stories you want to tell anyway. Just, pick up your phone, shoot something in the back garden. You can get amazing images out your phone now. You can get yourself a second-hand DSLR with a nice prime lens or something. You can get some nice cinematic shots. Just enjoy telling stories for as long as possible before you kind of get into that business world and all that need to kind of tick the boxes that are going to make it commercially viable.
Okay, cool. And is there other forms of video content that you shoot? Do you do TV shows or any other kind of media production, or is it purely the film, John?
Yeah, I mean, as practicing what I preach to some degree, I've got various levels of what I do. So we're, as this company, Fellowship Film, which I'm 1/5 of, we are shooting will be a fairly professional, hopefully, level feature film in September. But I can't just sit on my hands and do. I love telling stories. I love just creating things. So I like today. I've just been shooting a little short film called "The Boy Who Grew Wings," which is like sort of analogy for autism and stuff, which is a big part of my life. I've got 2 music videos that I'm shooting tomorrow. One for a young man called Cormac Thompson, who's quite famous, was on Britain's Got Talent, Young Chorister of the Year and stuff. And then one for just one of my singing pupils and me. We're going to do a duet together. And Cormac's going to be a runner for that. He's going to get some experience. And So it's such a mix, you know. I really mean that. You know, go out, take your phone, just make a film, tell a story. It's the greatest thing ever. So whatever I do, I'm always very conscious that I want to never be in a position where I'm not able to do that. So I'll do lots of little projects all the time. I've always got different things kind of in the background, and when I got an opportunity to kind of do one of those, I will. And then there'll be bigger things I'm working on as well. Like something in the middle for is Nelson the Giant. I've been working on that for a long time. So it's a kind of co-production with a lady from Canada called Sandy Gemmell, who has a kind of anti-bullying material called Nelson the Giant. And I made a short film for her, and that's become quite a big project in and of itself. And we shot that all kind of professionally and got people involved and paid the actors properly and all this kind of stuff. So that's a kind of one in the middle. So you got all your little stuff, you know, that you just do almost for fun, really. You got your stuff kind of in the middle where it's collaborating with people, and then you've got your bigger, more professional stuff. But just keep creating is always the advice I would give.
Okay. And how do you start shaping that story into some form of script or narrative? What's the process?
I think it depends on the size of the project for sure. I mean, I would say like the one I was working on today, for example, it was a case of just seeing the opportunity, finding some locations and some actors. Like, oh, that could work. Maybe I can pick up that idea that I've had for a while. And maybe we can suddenly make this work. Gathering props, all this kind of stuff. Storyboarding is really easy now. For the first time for my storyboarding, I just typed the descriptions of what I wanted into AI and got kind of AI renderings of the images, and then kind of so I had them as the kind of example image, and then wrote beside it the shots that I wanted, the primary shot, and then the cutaways that I was going to shoot. So I ended up just kind of being 8 scenes, really, really simple. Storyboard it, then just turn up and shoot it. We've got probably another couple of days of shooting, but we'll just sort of work that out as we go. It's very much just fitting it in whenever we can. Very informal.
Okay, interesting. I've got a creative passion to create a TV show based on a narrative I have, so that's why I suddenly went down a tangent and asked some questions. We'll ask that off the podcast so it doesn't bore other people. You mentioned autism's a large part of your life, and what form, shape does that take, or what's the background?
Oh yeah, massive part of my life. Yes, my oldest daughter is autistic. She's 7. She goes to a unit. So there's just 6 children in her class. Highly trained staff. They do a great job. But life's quite tricky for her. It's not. I mean, autism is so broad. It's so broad. For her, it affects her life quite a lot. It's quite high needs autism, you would call it. Like today, I was trying to go into get some stuff for the music videos tomorrow, and she just refused to go into any shops. It's too overwhelming. But I had to also get her out of the house because they couldn't leave her in the house with her younger sister, because her younger sister had to get ready for bed and everything. So it's like, it can be quite challenging. It's all about regulation, trying to keep her regulated, kind of keep her active, but then not overwhelmed. Yeah. It's tricky, but I work, a big part of my work is working with autistic children and sometimes adults as well, with a sort of, you call it music therapy, would be the easiest way to describe it, but I'm not a therapist, so technically it's not music therapy, but it's that sort of thing. And so I do that in lots of different contexts, but mostly schools, kind of tier 3 schools with quite severe needs.
Okay. Well, how do you learn?
Hey everyone, just a quick break from the episode. As you know, Insert Buzzword is a passion project for us, and we love creating this content for you. If you're enjoying the show and want to support us in keeping it going, we've set up a super easy way for you to do that. Head over to the episode description and click on the support the show. Any contribution helps, and it means the world to us. Thanks again for being awesome listeners. Cheers.
About how to, like with your daughter, how did you learn how to support her? Is it just through experience? Is it as a parent? I guess it's a different environment. There's not a kind of one size fits all kind of all the answers. So you can't really learn it from a textbook, presumably. So how do you adapt and learn to different scenarios?
Yeah, well, I was very fortunate that I'd actually started working long before before I even had Christiana, and certainly before we knew that she had autism. I mean, she was technically only diagnosed a few months ago because the waiting list is absolutely insane at the moment. It's like 3 years, So just in case anybody doesn't realize how that's going down, that we knew for a long time. So it was a surprise to absolutely nobody. But yeah, I was doing this kind of music therapy stuff before that, and so I'd been surrounded by it for ages. And I really do consider myself very fortunate for that, because it didn't. I think it would have been really difficult if I hadn't had that, because it can be scary when you feel that your child has needs and you just can't fulfill them, and you also know that nobody else is going to do it for you. So I'm really grateful for that. There are things you can learn. I think that's important to point out as well, that there are like low demand strategies, for example, are very important with Christiana. And those are things that are just useful to know, that if you have somebody who's very demand avoidant, as she is, that those demands cause anxiety. And it can be like, if you're trying to tell them to do something repeatedly, it's like shouting at somebody who's drowning, like, "Can you stop flailing around, please? Can you listen to me? You're not listening to my instructions." Like, they're drowning, of course, they're not listening, it's that sort of thing. So there's a lot that you can sort of learn of just out of books, as it were, websites. And but yeah, it's the vast majority of it is through experience. And when I say experience, I mean trial and error. People will often say to me, like, "Oh, you're so patient." It's like, I am not patient. I just know the consequences, that if I flare up, it's going to make everything worse. Why would I want to make everything worse? So you just learn what sometimes works, and you learn what never works, and then over time you just give up on doing the things that never work, and you try to do more of the things that sometimes work. That's basically it.
Can you share a bit about your music journey? What was your earliest experience with music, and how has it developed over time?
Yeah, well, playing with family again, large musical family.
Is everyone in your family music, or is there one or two siblings that or family members that don't have an interest in music?
Varying degrees. My oldest sister, Amy, is literally a musical genius. I don't say that lightly, but she was composing music and stuff when she was 7, and just because of where we were and just when we were, that was never really picked up. And she's had quite a difficult life, really, as creative people often do. She's doing great now. But, so she was the oldest. So we were surrounded by a really high level of music making and creativity all the time. She had us like recording albums and all sorts of things. And a lot of that was down to Amy. I think that needs acknowledged. I don't think there was any of us that didn't do a bit of music. It's just what we did. But we certainly adopted it to varying degrees. I adopted it to the highest degree, if you like. So I mean, yes, it's certainly been a bigger part of my career than it has for anybody else in my family. I studied at the conservatoire. My degree is in classical singing, actually. But nowadays you need to be a jack of all trades, as I said. And so I did the classical circuit for about 8 years, oratorios, singing, concerts and things. And my mainstay was directing choirs. I had about 6 choirs at one point. But obviously when family and stuff comes along, you realize that is an incredibly antisocial way to live your life because it's all evenings and weekends. And I have a great affection for choirs, but you can't have that be your whole life. So yeah, I kind of diversified quite a lot after that. And that's when I was fortunately able to start doing more of the music therapy stuff, which is more during the day. So that worked out really well.
It's a shame Jeremy's not on this podcast, because he's in a choir currently and would have been able to relate to some of your musical experience, but not to the scale of leading 6 choirs. But he's certainly involved in his local choir. So.
Yeah. Well, I enjoyed your last podcast, classical accordionist on, didn't you?
Yeah, Brian. Yeah,
which was really
yeah. You never, like, when you think of or how I know him in kind of a business context or the tire runner side of things, you never would, obviously guess that would be part of his background or his upbringing. So it's always interesting to find out these aspects about people. That's why we do the podcast, I guess. But yeah, okay, cool. Was there any kind of challenges or struggles you faced in that musical journey? What was it like studying music? Did it take any of the enjoyment away, or did it fuel your passion?
I need to be careful what I say here. Well, the short answer is that studying music was brutal, absolutely brutal, with some caveats. Before I went to the conservatoire, I should have said I spent 2 very happy years at Edinburgh College, which was called Stevenson College in those days. And I did an advanced music course there, and it was absolutely great. And really, it was my first experience really of studying music formally. There wasn't a lot of opportunities up in Caithness, to put it mildly. So that opened my eyes. I'd just fallen into it, really. It wasn't like, oh, I want to be a musician and I need to do this and I need to do this and I have a plan. I was like, I didn't even think I was going to go to university. I remember my mum just sat me down one day, when I was like 16 or something, like, that she was, can't remember exactly how she put it, but it was something along the lines of like, there comes a point where you need to know what you want to give back in life or something, like what impact are you going to make? I'm paraphrasing, but that's how I heard it. And I was like, oh yeah, this isn't just about jumping through hoops. This is about, what do I want my life to be? What impact do I want that to have? And then I was like, well, I'm decent at music. I could do a music course. But it was just like, there really wasn't a lot of thought in it. But when I was in that environment, surrounded by other people that were really passionate about music as well, and like the tutors were just fantastic, I was like, oh, this is flipping brilliant. So I did really well in that course, and I got into the conservatoire. That was a very different experience. Very different experience. I don't feel any qualms about saying this, because I think I'm on a bit of a campaign that people realize this. So many of my colleagues actually now that I work with, with the music therapy stuff, are conservatoire graduates, and have had a similar experience where they just find it absolutely brutal. And it's such a common story that I hear of people that went through that, and like they have learned to play their instrument probably to kind of the highest level in the country. Probably at the time when they graduated, they're one of the best players of their age in the country, and consequently, globally. And then they don't think anything of saying, never do that again. The horn is going to go back in the case, never touching it again, never knowing music. I need to do whatever the opposite of music is. I'm there. I'm going to do that. And you can't get any more wrong than that. Like whatever's happening, it can't be any more wrong than that. So I don't feel any qualms really by just saying it's a really difficult environment to be in. And I'd really encourage people who are going into it to sort of be aware of that, and nothing should steal your joy of music, that nothing is worth that cost. I think for a lot of people it does, and that for me is tragic.
Okay. So after the conservatoire, what did you do? Were you did you lose your interest in music, or you were just Did it lack enthusiasm? What was the journey post conservatoire?
I think everybody has to go through a journey of reinventing themselves somewhat when they move from music student into musician. I was quite fortunate. Well, I'd say very fortunate that I'd had that positive experience before in Stevenson. So I just knew inherently something wasn't quite right. My journey was actually that I did a year of the conservatoire and then had a mental breakdown and then had to take a year out. And then I didn't think I was going to go back. And I had a sort of quite a weird experience where I just really felt very strongly that I needed to go back. Probably relating to, those sort of sentiments that my mum had expressed when I was 16. And I knew that in order to be the best musician that I could be, and in order to have the most impact that I could have, I needed to go back into that environment once again, and somehow come out the other end. And I thought at that point I was going back for 3 years. There were some complications with the SAS funding and stuff, and then SAS said, "Oh, we're not funding you, and you need to, in fact, you need to pay back everything that you funded that we gave you last year because we shouldn't have given you that either." And so that was so things were pretty rock bottom at that point. Long story short, what we were able to do, and thanks to my singing teacher as well, who really fought my corner, I was able to get advanced entry into second year, so I didn't have to retake that first year, and then that meant that somehow the funding thing worked out okay, I think, and then I was able to, so I did another 3 years of conservatoire, and then I graduated from conservatoire, and that was me done.
Okay. What, going through those experiences, what was your biggest learning or takeaways from those challenging times?
I mean, you learn a lot. You grow up, really. I think I definitely learned that you need to, as I said before, you can't let anybody steal your joy. You have to know what's really important. And if something that somebody is telling you is important, or the culture around you is telling you is important, is destroying your love of music, or, is turning it into a mathematical exercise, or is forcing you into a box or to jump through a hoop that you just don't feel is worth it, then it's not that you don't do it necessarily, because at the end of the day, you're a student, you need to get your degree, you need to do your job, but you have to keep in the back of your mind, nothing is more important than that original spark that made me want to do this in the first place, that spark of creativity, that joy that music gives to you or to those who are listening. It's got to be about that, and there's all sorts of people in lots of different areas. It's not just conservatoires and things like X Factor, where I've got a lot to answer for as well. But they'll try and turn it into something else. And I'm not saying that music isn't all of those things. Music can be a competition. Music can be, very much commercial. Music can be about getting qualifications, working through exams. But we all know deep down it's about much more than that. The thing that attracts people to art in the first place is that sense of the transcendent. And that is your job as a musician. If you want to be a musician or a creative or a filmmaker or anything like that, you are trying to provide that for other people. That's what they're really seeking. And you have to just trust your instinct, trust your gut, that if something is trying to take that away, it needs to be resisted.
Cool. And what would you say we've kind of spoken about the challenges quite a lot, but what would you say your greatest achievement or success has been to date?
Still alive. That's one. It's a joy. It really, sometimes I just wake up, well, not when I wake up, because I'm really not a morning person, but sometimes when I'm doing some of the things that I do, I just can't believe, I just think I must be the luckiest person in the world, to be able to do what I love, and for that to be what I do for a living. And I can't really imagine myself doing anything else. So just, having got through that, it's really tricky when you first graduate and you're trying to get your first job and you're trying to get your first gig and you're trying to get, website or some sort of social media presence. You're trying to get people to notice you, but without sounding needy. All that stuff is really, really difficult. Nothing but sympathy for people that are going through that. I don't have any like hacks, I'm afraid. It's just tricky. But yeah, once you get through that, it's so brilliant. Once you kind of feel that, I'm actually doing it. I'm doing the music career thing that everybody said was impossible, that I shouldn't do, and I should do something safer. So that, just having got there, I think is the biggest success.
Okay. What does your life look day to day with all the different things that you might do? And obviously conscious it'll change depending on what you're working on, but on a typical week or typical day, what does it look like? Are you having to work in the evenings? Are you working weekends, or is it fairly stable?
Yeah, well, at the moment, thankfully, it's I've got quite a good wee routine going. Back when I was doing choirs, as you say, it was all evenings, all weekends. I've got less of that now, which is good. So typically on Monday and Tuesday, that's my music days. So that's the kind of music therapy type stuff. Keep calling it music therapy, but it's not therapy. But working with people with severe needs. I'm in a school all day on Monday in Paisley, and have been on Tuesday morning as well. And then I'm in the south side in Cathcart, working with younger adults mostly, as well as some children in Cathcart there. Then Wednesday, I've got some individuals as well. So Wednesday's one of my individuals, a great guy in his 30s, again with additional needs I do music with out in Kilsyth. Wednesday is my catch-up day, though, because Monday and Tuesday are absolutely brutal. I've also got my youth choir on Monday evening, so that's one evening, but finishes at 7, so it's fine. So I'm absolutely done in by the end of Tuesday. It's a really intense couple of days, the Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday's a lot easier. Thursday's my private teaching day. I've got a bunch of wee pupils in the West End, mostly at the moment, as well as lots of people that I kind of teach on a kind of more ad hoc basis. Friday is swimming lessons with Christiana, as well as lots of admin and stuff. Weekends just depends. Sometimes might be a film project. Sometimes it'll be just doing stuff with family. Sometimes it will be other things. I have other projects that will be slotting in there as well. So very intense times. I will have all that I just described, but then on Wednesdays and Thursdays and maybe Fridays as well, I might be doing like a prison project or something. I've done that sometimes, going in, doing music with the guys, putting on a kind of drama production or something. So there's lots of other potential projects that will come and go. So you get really, really busy times, and then you get much quieter times, like the summer, for example, can be very quiet indeed.
Okay. And some of our podcast guests have discussed or spoken about the challenge of work-life balance. What's your experience of that with family commitments and all the other things that you have on?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the biggest challenge. The weird thing is it's very hard to know what that line between work and life is really. And that's, I think, another thing one needs to be careful with when you're doing what you love for a living. You don't have any hobbies. You don't do anything that you do to relax or anything, because the thing that you do for work is what you do to relax. So, I don't think I'm doing a very good job of it, if I'm being honest. We're working on it. It's been working recently because my wife is long-term off sick work. I don't think it was working before then, Okay. So it was one of those things where actually it was the worst possible circumstances that helped us get the work-life balance thing a little bit better. But yeah, what I would say to people that are struggling with it, I think it is tricky. And I think what I wish people understood is how difficult it is when you work, you feel guilty because you're not spending, time with family, and you're not, fulfilling those duties. When you're spending time with family and fulfilling those duties, you feel guilty because you could be working in theory, and you might have projects and deadlines and stuff. And like, well, I could be doing that right now technically, but I can't. So I think it's a very individual thing. If you've got the type of personality that's very driven by guilt, then it can be a real struggle. If you've got a very methodical brain, you can just be like, well, that's my time for that, that's my time for that, and then you feel no guilt at all, then I think you probably get along much better.
Yeah. It's certainly something that I would struggle with, or do struggle with. I think over time you either, I don't know what your experience is, but my experience is that I've had to learn the hard way, trial and error, and you go through little phases of where, because there is a fine line between, but my motivation a lot of time is family, but I have to work or my focus or drive at work is often the family. So how do you don't want to be the absent father that put everything into the work and never had time for their kids, but equally to either provide financially or to even, I guess, to a certain extent, set an example of hard work. You want to do that, and I struggle to say no sometimes. But as I've got older and made mistakes and learned from them, there'll never be a perfect balance, I don't think, because it's individual circumstances. There's not a one size fits all, but certainly I feel I've got a pretty good balance. But it's something I have to constantly work on, because it's quite easy to get sucked into things. Or with my role currently, it's not my passion, but I enjoy it. And there's some nights where I will work till 7, 8, sometimes 9 or 10 o'clock, and then there'll be some times where I'm just very disciplined and like, no, now's family time, or put enough in, and it's not worth sacrificing any more of that protected time or important time for family. I think there has to be some give or take, because you can't have this perfect equilibrium where you can balance that time, certainly, or in my experience anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any, I presume it's changed over time, or you've learned different skills at different points in your life, but is there any unique qualities or habits or traits that you have that you think's contributed to your success in various roles or capacities over time?
I think the commonality is that I'm very intuitive, and that's been very useful for my practice. As a performer, you're communicating with an audience, so being able to sort of feel what they're feeling is a big part of that. It's very important when you're working with these children with severe needs. I'm trained in a type of therapy called intensive interaction, which is actually developed listening to mothers communicating with their newborn babies. And they realized that they were kind of talking to each other, but non-verbally. And the mother would often sort of just imitate what the baby was doing, and the baby would respond and stuff. It's like there's no words involved, but there was definitely communication happening. So it's like, there must be a form of communication that is possible without words. And then this kind of technique was developed where you're using music to do that. And that can be the most incredible experience when you've got a non-verbal child who's, so they're not able to speak, but they can make a movement, or they can play an instrument or something, and then you can respond to what they're doing. And when they realize that you're communicating with them, it's a really, really special experience. So I love doing that kind of stuff. I think also just day to day in life, it's so much about relationships, isn't it? When you're building business relationships or personal relationships, or just, friendships with people that, when you're having a hard time, they're going to be able to help you out or whatever, then just being able to get alongside people. I think it's a challenge as well, because being intuitive. Empathetic might be another word for it. It's hard to switch off, and I talked about that guilt thing before as well. Like that's part of the dark side of that, in a way, that you can just be feeling guilty your whole life, no matter what you're doing, feeling that you're not doing enough, or that you're doing it wrong or whatever. But that is, I think, what allows me to be creative in the way that I am, because I think I can feel on a visceral level what other people are feeling often.
When did you become aware of that, or how do you learn that that's a talent or a skill set?
I think quite early. Yeah. I mean, school is a brutal place to be an empath. Really brutal. Because, yeah, you don't get to practice it in a very wholesome environment often. So I think I always knew, but it was only, I remember when I was a leader on my first residential camp and stuff, and so looking after a bunch of kids for the first time, and I just thought it was the best thing ever. I was like what? I get my own little kingdom, and I get to look after these children, and communicate with them, and be part of a team of other people that are doing the same thing, and we're all working on this together. And so I think, that first point where you have responsibility, where it switches from I'm just sitting in a classroom absorbing all this rubbish around me, to, I can actually now use this tool to understand other people and to maybe understand things that they're not able to communicate. That suddenly switches and becomes, this is actually something which is really exciting and has so many possibilities, rather than something which is just difficult.
Okay. Yeah, it's too long for this podcast, but I find that kind of thing fascinating. Or how, I guess the intangible qualities. There's certain qualities that are, depending on the definition of it, I guess, but physical strength, it comes in various forms, I guess, to be fair, but it's quite clear if you have it, or it's quite tangible how you could gain it. It's quite a straightforward path, but the more perceptive or softer skills are, interesting. Team dynamics and all these kind of things, and there's maybe it's we're a bit more self-aware than we used to be, but traditionally it's very much the loudest person is the leader and the one that people listen to, but it's often the ones that are a bit more softly spoken or quieter that are the wiser ones. So I find those dynamics and how in different environments or cultures or whatever it might be, teams, it can be apparent in different ways, and how different teams develop. Or you could have the exact same people in totally different environments, and it would develop slightly different, but the exact same people with the exact same skills and personalities. So yeah. You mentioned you like listening to podcasts. Do you have a top 3 podcasts that you'd recommend to our listeners to go and check out?
Well, there's this one called Insert Buzzword, which is really good. I certainly recommend that. But I have genuinely enjoyed a lot of these episodes. Really fascinating. Loved listening to Lucy Barr's one, obviously, because I know Lucy. And I taught her triplets as well, so I loved hearing about her experience of being a mother of triplets. I taught them piano for 4 years or something, maybe 3 or 4 years, so that was quite something. There's all sorts of podcasts I like to listen. I like to listen to quite a variety. I mean, sometimes I will listen to things, like American politics, for example. I will try and listen to things that will give me the two extremes, so that I can try and find it somewhere in the middle. The Diary of a CEO. I find this I enjoy that one as well. I do like a bit of Jordan Peterson, I have to say, and I understand that can be controversial, but I enjoyed Jordan Peterson when he was just a psychologist, because I love all the psychology stuff, and then it all became very political. But actually, in terms of his psychology stuff, it's actually really fascinating. It's very Jungian, so that's kind of my kind of brain. It's very sort of ethereal stuff, which and how that relates to evolutionary biology and so on and so forth. I'm kind of fascinated by all that. But yeah, wide range of stuff, and I love sort of trying out new podcasts.
Good. Okay. I like listening to Smartless, which is Will Arnett, Jason Bateman, and Sean Hayes. I find that interesting just because it is speaking to people and finding out their stories. I listen to Diary CEO quite a lot, and then current affairs, I guess I'd call it, but a combination of UK and US politics. Affairs. It is interesting to hear different perspectives, and I went to America relatively recently in May, and just hearing it firsthand from certain people was quite eye-opening, because you kind of hear interviews on TV or on podcasts, and you kind of think, okay, that's, some people think that, or it's a soundbite, but when you hear or see how strongly people feel about different issues or different things, it's quite, for what I consider a fairly mild-mannered British person, it was quite interesting to feel it, I should say, probably, and to experience it firsthand. So, what are your kind of future plans, future goals? Is there anything on the horizon that's any film projects, or I guess you've mentioned a few things you're working on already, but is there any big plans coming up?
This feature film, hopefully shooting in September, is certainly a big thing on the horizon. We're in the process of casting at the moment.
Are you able to say what it's about, or is it's all under wraps? Or
no, it's called Guardians of Loch Ness. So it's about a CIA agent from America who comes over to kind of investigate a weird sort of kind of attempt on her life, and it leads her to Scotland, and there may or may not be a monster involved. They may or may not be that's the selling point. Obviously, Guardians of Loch Ness, and hopefully shooting on location. It should be lots of fun. Cast is looking very exciting already. We've had some reasonably high profile people applying to us. We thought we were going to have to contact them. But I think that is just the state of the industry at the moment, that people, I think I heard statistics of 60% of the film industry is out of work at the moment.
Wow.
So that's for actors and crew and everything else. So it's quite desperate.
What's prompted that? I have known nothing about the industry.
Well, lots of things. I think we've been going for a while is, the big companies are the big studios. They're making massive budget, things which could be several smaller films, and they're very risk averse, and the nature of that is it's squeezing the middle an awful lot, so that there's just less being made, and there's less kind of. And there's lots of people that want to do it. Obviously, it is kind of a saturated market with the best will in the world, because who doesn't want to be a filmmaker, So, it's tricky, but also the dynamics of online, video on demand and stuff, that's changed things. There's just a lot less money sloshing around, because, as I say, everybody wants to watch films, but nobody wants to pay for them. So. It's changing, but you got to roll with the punches. You can't just sort of lie down and say, "Oh, it's all over. The industry's guffed." There's no hope. You got to look. It's changing. You look for the new opportunities and respond to them.
Okay, cool. And any final thoughts or messages for the listeners before we ask our final question?
Yeah, well, I would just reiterate what I, said before about if you are sort of, whether you're doing it as a career or whether you're a keen amateur musician or filmmaker or storyteller or whatever, I think that's important. And it's important in ways that are intangible, but that doesn't make it any less important. And so it needs to be protected, and you need to value that. And yeah, I think whatever level you're doing it at, whatever level you kind of want to do it at, I would say that's really important.
Okay, cool. So, as you will have listened to on other episodes of the podcast, at the end, we like to ask our guests what their favorite, or I guess most hated buzzword is in their industry or just in general. So do you have a favorite or least popular, I don't know what the phrase is, one you don't like, buzzword in your life?
Yeah. Well, it's not so much a buzzword as a phrase, but the phrase, which I'm sure everyone will have heard, it's not who you know, it's not what you know, it's who you know, really annoys me because I understand why it's true, but it sort of gives the impression, I think, that when you're working in that kind of industry, it's all about, climbing up the greasy pole and ingratiating yourself to people who are above you in that greasy pole, and maybe being a bit false, maybe sort of, pretending that you're something you're not in, and so that you can get in with those people that you should know. And that is, I think, just a really bad strategy. So I always just sort of, try to gently say no. When people say that to me, it's like, oh, well, it's not what you know, it's who you know. It's like, no, it's like, it is what you know. If people are trying to create something of value, then they want you to have the skills. They want you to be a good person to work with. They want you to, and yes, you need to get those initial opportunities, but don't ingratiate yourself to people. Don't think it's some sort of weird hierarchy that you need to climb into, because actually that leads to a really bad place. That leads to, a place where actually you end up often either a very nasty person that nobody likes, or just in despair because you think you've ticked all the right boxes and you've ingratiated yourself to all the right people, and still nobody wants to work with you. So I would say just it is more what you know. Be the best you can at your art. Don't lose your passion. Try to be a little better every day, and just be decent and kind to people, and see how it goes.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Matthew. It's been a pleasure hearing your story and journey and experiences. And to our listeners, we will be back with another episode next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you're enjoying Insert Buzzword, please consider leaving us a review on your favourite podcast platform. Your reviews help us reach new listeners and keep the show going strong. And if you have any questions, topic suggestions, or dream guests for the podcast, we'd love to hear from you. You can send a message to the link in our episode description. Bye!